Today at 1, the UK is unprepared for climate change. A stark report out today warns of floods, heat waves, droughts and wildfires and says government policy has stalled. The government isn't doing enough to prepare for the growing threat of increasingly extreme weather. Hospitals, schools and transport systems are all at risk. That's according to a report out today by the UK's climate watchdog. It found the weather in the UK is intensifying from the 40-degree summer heat of 3 years ago to England's wettest 18 months on record from October 2022. Well, the report from the Independent Climate Change Committee says food and water supplies could be vulnerable in the decades ahead and that government progress is too slow, has stalled or is heading in the wrong direction. Well, it comes as former Prime Minister Sir Tony Blair has called for a major rethink of net zero policies, describing strategy based on phasing out fossil fuel or limited consumption alone as doomed to fail. Here's our climate editor, Justin Rowlett.
Everybody get back, shouts an emergency worker as a wave of floodwater rushes down the high street in Tenbury Wells in Worcestershire. In seconds, the whole street is submerged.
So here's what happened. Loads of rain, the drains backed up so there was already water on the street. Then the brook rose up from the level there to this wall. The wall collapsed, releasing that wave of water onto the street.
Locals say it's the 7th time the town has been flooded in the last 4 years. Things were made even worse when a man drove a tractor along the street, creating a tidal wave that smashed windows. The flood was a disaster for a local charity shop.
We had a tsunami and it came up as high as we've got panelling right up to there. And new floors, it was an absolute disaster. We got all our Christmas stuff ready, lost it because it was foul water, all winter clothes, the whole caboodle. We were closed for 3 months.
I am in the shop. It's quite wet.
The government says it can't afford the £30 million scheme that would stop flooding in Tenbury. Today, the Climate Change Committee said the government isn't doing enough to protect the entire country from the extreme weather climate change is bringing. It says 1 in 4 houses could be at risk of flooding by 2050, as well as half of our roads and railways. Heat already causes thousands of deaths in the UK, but the total could exceed 10,000 a year by the middle of the century.
The manifesto said it was going to address this issue of resilience, and yet so far it's done nothing. This is not a tomorrow problem, it's a today problem, and if we don't address it today, it becomes a disaster tomorrow.
The government insists it does take preparing the country for climate change seriously, with £2.6 billion of new money for flood protection, including £400,000 for Tenbury Wells.
What the Climate Change Committee says is you are simply not doing enough.
Well, they're absolutely right to hold our feet to the fire, but we absolutely know, of course, there's more that needs to be done. We're already starting to work across government at this issue because we know and acknowledge climate change is real. It's a very real threat.
It took months for the residents of Tenbury Wells to clean up their town, but events like this will only become more common and more severe as humanity continues to warm the planet. Justin Rowlett, BBC News, Tenbury Wells.
Now, the government has been accused of failing to prepare for extreme weather caused by climate change. A damning report has laid out the damage that could be caused to homes, infrastructure and lives if no action is taken. And our science correspondent Martin Stew is here. So, Martin, talk us through these findings, would you?
Well, Mary, the report doesn't mince its words. It's by the Independent Climate Change Committee, and it says government action on adaptation is either too slow, has stalled, or is heading in the wrong direction. One of the biggest risks with our changing weather, of course, is flooding. We had the wettest 18 months on record between 2022 and 24. And the report found, whilst currently a third of railways and roads are at risk of flooding now, by 2050, that will have increased to a half. 6.3 million homes are currently in areas prone to flooding. By 2050, that will be up at 8 million, a quarter of all properties. Then you have the risks of extreme heat, wildfires, buckling railways and deadly heat waves. Last summer, around 1,300 died as a result of heat. With an ageing population, by 2050, that's expected to rise to 10,000 people every year. And the report looked at 46 different areas. None were found to be making good progress, and good plans were only in place in 3 areas.
All government departments need to be thinking about this. They need to be integrating adaptation into their key plans and relevant policies, and it absolutely needs to be featuring in the spending review as something we must be investing in now.
Now, this criticism comes at an awkward time for the government. Just yesterday, Tony Blair wrote of his concerns about an unrealistic focus on net zero, encouraging governments to pivot instead towards tech solutions like carbon capture and AI. He today clarified his position, saying his views absolutely align with Labour's policies, but the government has had to defend its drive to net zero, saying it will cut bills in the long run. It also says it is spending record amounts. It's committed those to flood defences and outlined those in the autumn budget.